How's it going, guys? This is Jack here with the Commander's Wire, and welcome back to another video. We had a lot of things happen over the last couple of days. A lot of Commander's news has been broken, as well as Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have spoken at this year's NFL Draft Combine regarding the draft, as well as the offseason in general. So we're going to see what they're going to have to say about that. Before we get into today's video, I really would appreciate it if you guys would go down below, drop a like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to know when I post next. It really does help me out, and it lets me know that you guys want more Commanders content just like this. So without further ado, let's get right into today's video. We're going to get these small things done out of the way first. So the Commanders have signed Andrew Wiley, offensive tackle, to a 2-year, $7.5 million contract with options to go up to $10.5 million. So I think this is a very good signing. Andrew Wiley is probably one of the top backup offensive linemen in the NFL. He can play at any tackle spot, any guard spot. He's a lot of versatility there. He was once a starter with the Washington Commanders, but I think he's one of the most solid offensive line depth pieces that any team could be having. And I think that it was great to have him in the burgundy and gold for the next 2 seasons behind Sam Cosmi, Josh Connolly Jr., as well as everybody on the left side of the offensive line. So I think that was great for the Commanders to get done. Next up, Brian Johnson. He lands a job with the Rams as their new senior offensive assistant, along with Cliff Kingsbury, who is the assistant head coach for the Rams. So obviously we knew that Cliff Kingsbury mutually left the team to pursue other options, and recently Brian Johnson decides to leave as well. He was definitely overlooked for the offense coordinator position, but Dan Quinn definitely did not want to let David Blau leave the facility and go somewhere else. So I think that was definitely worth looking over Brian Johnson. Obviously, he was a great addition on the coaching staff. So unfortunately, he did find a new job over with the LA Rams. However, I think the Commanders are going to do their best in order to fill his spot either internally or making another hire soon. I know that some of the roles that they still have left, they're definitely going to have some other positional coaches take up and have more than one role under their job title, and as well as maybe making some more promotions. So we'll just have to see in the next coming days. I'll speak more about this later, but Dan Quinn did say at his press conference today that they are going to probably finalize the staff within the next couple of days. So hopefully after that we'll be able to see the final Washington Commanders coaching staff for the 2026 season. And next up, this is some more old news that came out over the weekend that I missed in yesterday's video, but Alec Pierce is also very likely to stay in Indianapolis, which I'm not surprised about. I knew he was not going to leave Indianapolis. I think he wants to be there. Obviously, the Colts want him to be there. However, that does make Michael Pittman Jr.'s future in Indianapolis definitely a question mark. He's getting paid almost $30 million, and a lot of that is not guaranteed. So they could potentially cut him or restructure his contract, and that could shake things up for the Washington Commanders, who are looking to add a receiver in this free agency class. So we'll just have to see what happens with that. But at the end of the day, Alec Pierce is no longer going to be a free agent. I think he's probably going to get a deal done in Indianapolis and stay with the Colts. So next up, Zach Ertz is making great strides in his ACL recovery, and he plans on returning to the NFL for a 14th season. So what does this mean for the Washington Commanders? Could they sign him? Could they let him go in free agency? We'll just have to see. It seems to be that he'll be ready to go by week 1. And if he is re-signed by the Washington Commanders, that will most likely make him the top tight end in this tight end room. Obviously, he's one of Jaden Daniels' favorite targets to throw at. He's always there. He is Jaden Daniels' safety blanket. I think he's a solid target for the Washington Commanders offense. However, he is coming off a major injury. An ACL tear is nothing to scoff at, especially as an athlete. So we'll just have to see what type of performance he's able to put out. Obviously, he will probably be missing out on training camp, on summer workouts and stuff like that, just because of his recovery. And on top of that, we do have a new offense in here. David Blau does know Zach Ertz as a player. David Blau was with the Washington Commanders for the past 2 years, so they do have a relationship there. However, David Blau may want to bring in another type of tight end that is, number 1, healthy, but also number 2, may fit this offense more. So we'll just have to see. Personally, I love Zach Ertz. I think he was a great player for this organization. However, he's getting old, and that injury is nothing to overlook. And it may be best for Zach Ertz to finish his career somewhere else if he does want to start. If Zach Ertz does want to stay in Washington, maybe be a backup mentor. You could see the Washington Commanders do that, maybe they spend a high draft pick on a tight end, and then you also bring Zach Ertz back on a pretty cheap deal, and then you have Zach Ertz kind of being that number one tight end, and then having that tight end of the future who is a high draft pick, maybe like Ben Sinnott, but in this year's draft being right behind him to first of all learn and adapt to the NFL, and then maybe in a year or two take over the reins as this team's number one tight end. That is another option, but we'll just have to see. And lastly, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn spoke today. They have their press conferences at the NFL Combine, and this is what the two of them had to say. So starting out with Adam Peters, I'm going to be going over kind of the general gist of what they talked about. He first started out with Marshawn Lattimore's future. It's still up in the air. They're still working things out. They're in contact with his party, and they're trying to get some things worked out, like I said before. What does this mean? Some people think that they're trying to maybe trade him or restructure his contract. I really don't think that's what's happening. I don't think anyone's, first of all, going to trade for Marshawn Lattimore, especially in the condition that he's in with his injury history and the type of player he is on the field. But what I do think is happening is because he is injured, they have to reach a injury settlement. So that means that they have to pay him a certain amount of money just because he's an injured player rather than full on releasing him. Because if a player's injured, they're out for the season or whatever, they got injured in a Washington Commanders jersey, they can't just cut the player because they can't play. That really is not fair to the players because the players are working technically for the team they are playing for. So that means they have to receive some sort of compensation for their time here. And so that means that the Commanders are most likely going to pay him maybe $2, $3, $4, maybe even $5 million as an injury settlement just to release Marshawn Lattimore. So that means that we're not going to be retaining the full $18.5 million of this upcoming season's cap. However, we're still going to be saving $15, $14 million on the cap with releasing Marshawn Lattimore and giving him an injury settlement. Next up, Adam Peters talked about the extension for Laremy Tunsil. They said that some good conversations were had, and they're going to be hoping to get that extension done here soon. They're not going to put a hard deadline on that. However, they do think they'll be able to get something done in the near future, which is great because we don't want to have a repeat of what happened last year with Terry McLaurin. Adam Peters also says that he cannot comment on Brandon Ayuk since Brandon Ayuk is still technically under contract in San Francisco, but he does believe that they have a great relationship personally. There would not be any issues there regarding the player to general manager relationship between Brandon Ayuk and Adam Peters, going back to when Adam Peters was with San Francisco just a couple years ago. So I think that's great how that relationship is still very strong. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk has a couple more relationships here in Washington, especially with Jaden Daniels. So if Brandon Ayuk is released, I think that there's a very high chance he does come to Washington in free agency. Adam Peters also says, like before when I was talking about Zach Ertz, that the door is still open with his recovery process. His recovery is going great. I think he's definitely on track or even ahead of schedule in his recovery process, and that the door remains open for Zach Ertz if he does want to remain with the Washington Commanders in this free agency cycle. Adam Peters also says that they're going to absorb Brian Johnson's role in the coaching staff, and that most likely means that a promotion internally will happen, or the entire job title that Brian Johnson had will be divvied up among the staff there in Washington for the 2026 season if they do not want to hire or promote anybody else. And lastly, Adam Peters is very excited about Daron Payne and the new defense, but there have not been any talks about potential extension for Daron Payne. So far this season, he wants Daron Payne to finish out his contract through the 2026 season, and then they're going to figure out that whole situation when that happens. So looks like the only guy looking to be extended this offseason is going to be Laremy Tunsil. Next up, we have Dan Quinn and what he said. I think Dan Quinn definitely has, obviously he's a coach, he's a head coach, so he has a little bit more coach speak. He's saying a lot of words, but not really saying too much at all. So I definitely have a little bit less to say about what Dan Quinn said at his press conference. But starting out, he says that Bobby Wagner is expecting to play another year, and Dan Quinn says that he loves Bobby Wagner, first of all as a player, but also as a leader. So that makes me believe that Bobby Wagner may potentially be back here in Washington. I don't know if that would be the best move. Bobby Wagner is definitely a good linebacker when it comes to tackles and in the run game. However, when covering players, he is an absolute liability. He cannot cover tight ends. He cannot cover running backs in the passing games and on later downs. Bobby Wagner is definitely not someone that I want in the middle of the field when the quarterback is passing the ball. However, on the line of scrimmage, when Bobby Wagner is getting after the quarterback or on run plays, I think there's no one that does it better than him. So we'll just have to see, will Durante Jones be able to scheme Bobby Wagner if he does come back in a way that Bobby Wagner is going to excel at his strengths, being on the line of scrimmage, stopping the run, getting to the quarterback on blitzes, and minimizing his weaknesses, which is in coverage. So we'll just have to see what Durante Jones does in this defense, and even if Bobby Wagner comes back. Dan Quinn also mentioned that he really loves how Chris Paul developed this year, so that could mean that Chris Paul may be back as this team's starting left guard or potentially competing for that left guard spot. We'll just have to see, but I think that if Dan Quinn really likes him, I would not be surprised if the Washington Commanders want to bring Chris Paul back on this Commanders offense. Dan Quinn also mentioned that he expects a lot out of Daron Payne in this new Durante Jones scheme. He thinks that he'll be able to be a solid piece, especially even if it's a contract year. Daron Payne should be able to take advantage of the opportunity and hopefully be a big part of the defense. And he also says that he expects a lot of Ben Sinnott in this new David Blau offensive scheme. Hopefully, like Adam Peters says, he's a Kyle Juszczyk type of player, so maybe Ben Sinnott will be used a lot more in that role. First of all, being a fullback, but also being a receiving fullback where he's able to be a receiver out of the backfield on certain plays and do what he does best as a fullback / tight end hybrid player. So maybe Ben Sinnott can make a role on the field in that type of way. And lastly, Dan Quinn, he talked about the type of players he wants to add this year. I think Adam Peters also mentioned this. They're really looking to add length, and they're also looking to add speed, both on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. They want to have guys that have long arms, that have a lot of strength, but also a lot of speed, a lot of youth, and people that can just make plays that are versatile all over the field. So what does that mean? Especially on the defensive side of the ball, they're probably going to add a solid edge rusher that has a lot of length, a lot of speed, specifically that is able to get after the quarterback, but also stop the run a little bit as well. And then what does that mean on offense? Probably adding a couple more targets for Jaden Daniels in this offense, whether it be a running back, someone that can catch out of the backfield, another receiver potentially, and if they don't want to bring Zach Ertz back, probably another tight end. So we're expecting a lot of fireworks, as we've heard, this offseason when it comes to adding different players in the free agency class as well as in the draft class. But let me know down below, guys, what do you guys think of the information Dan Quinn and Adam Peters mentioned today in their press conferences? Do you guys think that this is just hoopla, as I could say, just a little bit of everything, not really saying much at all, and we're really just having the same questions as we did before regarding how the Commanders are going to end this offseason? Or do you guys think that you really enjoyed what they said today in their press conferences and they probably gave you a better idea of what to expect in this offseason regarding the current players signed with the Washington Commanders, as well as potential new players that are going to be signed, whether it be in free agency or in the draft? Just let me know down in the comments. This is the end of today's video. I really do appreciate you guys all sticking with me to the very end. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go down below, drop a like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to know when I post next. You guys will be notified whenever I post another Commanders video just like this. Thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and hail to the Commanders.